From having one of the best pitching staffs in baseball to all of a sudden having a 4.01 ERA, the Seattle Mariners pitching staff has honestly underperformed so far in the month of June. The Mariners fell out of the top 10 in all of MLB for where they were at with their ERA, and it's been no secret that the pitching staff has kind of been bad lately. And for a team like the Mariners, that's something that we really can't have happen because of how bad the offense has been. But what caused this? Why did the Mariners all of a sudden collectively, while they're on the mound, all start to struggle? Let's take a look. The first 2 months of the season, the Mariners did not have an ERA above 3.75, but in June that is spiked to a 6.48 as of recording this video, shortly after Bryce Miller's start versus the Miami Marlins. We're not going to include March in this because, well, they only played 2 games, so it's really a small sample size. But looking at the Mariners' numbers, they're walking more than they have so far this season at 3.12, not a huge jump from where they were at in April. Obviously, their ERA is the big one here. Their whip is up to a 1.52 in June compared to a 1.1 in the month of May. Of course, this is just in 9 starts. There's plenty of time for these stats to kind of even out. But for a Mariners offense that really has not been clicking so far this year, it's been pretty tough to watch the pitching staff start to falter as well. But that being said, in June, the Mariners hitters have been a lot better. In the month of June, the Mariners are hitting 244, 328, 395. They're up to a 4.22 runs per game. And while the month of May has not been off to a great start for the Seattle Mariners, obviously with a 3-6 record right now, a lot of the guys that were slumping have started to get off the schneid a little bit. Obviously, Julio has been really good his past couple of weeks. Teoscar Hernandez is looking like the Teoscar Hernandez that was in a Blue Jays uniform. And Eugenio Suarez had a big home run yesterday against the Miami Marlins. And hopefully, finally, this lineup is starting to click. Obviously, Caballero's been relatively decent over at second base. Mike Ford's been pretty good as a DH as well. So the Mariners, they may be starting to figure it out. Of course, Jared Kelenich's been slumping a little bit. There are guys, there are pockets, but the whole lineup is not struggling like they were even just last week. But we all know that we've seen the Mariners give up 10 runs or more way too often lately, including 16 runs when they were facing the Texas Rangers. And honestly, their struggles really started in that game versus Pittsburgh for George Kirby, where he gave up 4 or 5 home runs. The ball was flying out of T-Mobile Park that day. In that game, the Mariners gave up 11 runs to the Pirates, and then it was on to the Yankees series. In games 1 and 2 of that series, the Yankees scored 10 runs apiece in either game. We got our first look at Bryce Miller struggling, and Logan Gilbert had a tough outing as well, going only 4 innings pitched, 7 hits with 5 earned runs. And then it was on to face the Rangers, and the pitching woes would continue, giving up 16 runs in one game, 12 in the next to the Rangers, and then 10 against the Padres. The Mariners saw Bryan Woo make his debut, only lasting 2 innings with 7 hits, 6 runs, 1 walk, and 4 strikeouts. And the next day, Bryce Miller had his next blow-up start with 2.1 innings pitched, 8 hits, 7 runs, 2 walks, and 2 strikeouts. And as Mariners fans, we had really not seen Bryce Miller struggle yet, so seeing him struggle in back-to-back outings, honestly, I was worried that they might have figured him out a little bit. With that being said, he did put up a great performance versus the Miami Marlins, where he only let up 1 hit, albeit he did walk, I think, 3 or 4 in that game yesterday, which was, he didn't have great command of that 4-seam fastball, which was kind of weird to see for me, but nonetheless, Bryce Miller looked like he was kind of back in that game versus the Marlins. Unfortunately for the Mariners, someone who wasn't back yet was Logan Gilbert. In the final game against the Los Angeles Angels at Disneyland, Gilbert went only 3 innings pitched with 8 hits, 6 earned runs, and 2 strikeouts. Of course, anytime we see Flexen come into a game, we know that there's a problem because he's going to give up plenty of runs himself. But nonetheless, Logan Gilbert has looked pretty bad lately. And then, of course, that last game versus the Padres, the Mariners and George Kirby gave up 5 earned runs in just 3.2 innings pitched on 11 hits and 3 strikeouts. We already saw Luis Castillo have his struggles a little bit earlier in the season, but the growing pains we've seen for Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Bryce Miller, and even Bryan Woo at this point, it's been hard to watch as a Mariners fan because once you give up a few runs, at this point with this offense, you just kind of feel like you're out of the game. But the real reason for it, I think, is just baseball. If you want my honest opinion, it's just baseball. Eventually, this was going to catch up to the pitchers. They couldn't be as good as they were for as long as they had been and not eventually start throwing in some clunkers. Unfortunately for us, they were all happening around the same time, facing some really good offensive teams. I mean, keep in mind, the Rangers are one of the best hitting teams in all of baseball, and at the moment, all of the history of baseball. The Yankees are off to a hot start in the month of June. It's just so much harder to watch when the pitchers give up a bunch of runs when you know the offense is not going to make a comeback. Starts like these happen. They basically happen to every pitcher every single year. It's bound to happen at some point. It just so happens it also was going on while the offense was struggling. And again, there's some positive things to talk about, of course. Bryan Woo looked really good in his second outing. He was honestly lights out in my opinion compared to what he was in that first game that he had. Bryce Miller looked really good against the Marlins, and then of course you have Luis Castillo going on Wednesday versus the Marlins, with George Kirby on the bump today. So I think the Mariners might be trending in the right direction, and they can easily rattle off 5, 6, 7 wins. We saw the Oakland Athletics do it versus the Braves and the Brewers. If the Athletics can do it, yeah, the Mariners can rattle off a win streak here just fine. But they're going to start needing to do it quick, because the Mariners are going to have to start making some trades at the trade deadline. And Jerry Dipoto talked about this team's offensive struggles and what it means for the trade deadline in this video on the screen now. I want you guys to check that one out. Appreciate you guys watching this one. Go Mariners.